When you catch an exception, maybe you want to check for some condition. Maybe you want to check a property on the exception or some other variable in your code, and only in some cases you want to throw an exception or do some special handling. Since C#6 there is a feature called exception filter that is written as catch exception when, but this feature is not exactly the same as when you use catch and an if statement inside the block. Let's go into the code and see some examples. Here we have some ordinary program that throws an exception inside a try block and it catches it inside the catch block. We check for the message, and only if it is the same, we write something to the console. When we run it, there are no surprises. We see the text got you. Let's do the same, but now with an exception filter. Here we check for the condition in the when. So the code is a little bit smaller, but it's more or less the same. When we run this one, there are also no surprises. We see the text got you. But now let's see what happens when we throw an exception inside the catch block. In this example, we have an object that is set to null. And inside the try block, we again throw an exception. However, in the catch block, we check if the type of this object is of type object. But since the object is null, it will later throw an exception when we invoke getType on the object. When we run it, neither one of the write lines is executed. Instead, we get a friendly error message that informs us about the null reference exception. Now it gets really interesting when we use the same thing, but with the exception filter. Now we have the same example, but with an exception filter this time. And we have the catch all write line inside another catch block, because otherwise we wouldn't have a chance to catch everything. Now this might surprise you. This time we see the catch all, but no exception this time. So they are not the same. However, as is the case with normal exception handling, you cannot catch all type of exceptions, such as a Stack Overflow exception or a heap corruption exception. Maybe there are other types of exceptions that you cannot catch, even if you tried. So here we are using such an exception inside an exception filter. The method crash calls itself, and this should result in a Stack Overflow exception. Let's see if the exception filter can manage to ignore this exception or if it crashes. As you can see, it crashes. You might be tempted to write some dirty code inside the exception filter, but as you have seen before, there are cases where it can still crash. So I would advise you to still treat it as normal code and check for all erroneous conditions. Do you know about any other special features that differentiates an exception filter from a normal exception block with an if statement inside of it? Let me know in the comments. I hope you have learned something new today, and we will see you next time. Bye bye.